Hello, this is Max Drake. I want to talk about classes in AutoHotKey. I was doing this one here. I did a previous video on classes in AutoHotKey, and it basically following Samardac's course or tutorial that he does here. Because I just there was nothing really on YouTube, and I really wanted to step into it. Now on this one here, I followed his one, and I was able to take one of the programs that I actually have and convert it into a class and do. Now this video is not about just the things which I'm going to do. It's more about searching for things when you can't find things as well. So I hit a ball, I hit a problem, what you do about it. So let's just jump right into the code as to what I've done. So at the end of the previous video, I ended up with this one here. So I'm just going to run it at this point in time, and it's running, and now I just go out through. It comes up with a pop-up box, so you can put how many hours you did on a project. You can select the project that you actually have, and you can put I did nothing, and then you can go OK, and it's just telling you what you've actually described through there. Through this show me method, it then comes down in this write to file one through here. Right at the very bottom, it's actually doing a tray tip that's coming through. It paints that information to a file that we'll look at in an instant, and it will also write it to a backup file as well. So if we just come into there and look at the TimeCapture, you'll see I did nothing came through there. So I suddenly thought, well, okay then, I know classes. I've read Samardac thing, and I've gone through his tutorial, and I know all about them now because I'm a smart geezer. And in fact, that wasn't the case. I had some problems. So at the end of that tutorial, or the end of that video, I'd done the tutorial, and then I'd done this solution and got it through to here. For the next 2 days, I crashed and burned. What I wanted to then do next is that I suddenly thought, as well as learning the basic class, we also learned about inheritance and nesting. So I suddenly thought, well, okay, then I now want to take this class here, and I want to do another version of the program, and I want to use an inheritance process, and I also want to use a nested process. So I looked at the code that I've got, and it does two things. So if we look at the code, it comes up with the GUI, and it says, tell me what information you is. So there's a kind of the gathering of the information, and we store that information somewhere, and we can store that in an instant somewhere. And then we've got a second step to it, which is actually writing that information to a file, and we write it into different ways and display it and something like that. But basically we're doing two activities. One is a gathering, and one is a writing into a file or doing something. So I thought, well, actually I can carry on with this particular program because I'm comfortable with it, and now what I want to do is just start learning about inheritance. So I've got something that works, so there's no, I can just walk away from this now, but I'm suddenly thinking, no, I can use it for a further learning example based on the information that I've got. So that was the idea behind this, but when I tried doing it, I crashed and burned. 2 days I was trying to do this. Now I'll tell you how far I got after 2 days of this. I got this, first of all, I had to strip the whole program down, and I ended up stripping the program down, so I don't bother with the pop-up box. I actually just have the variables there, and they're in there ready to be grabbed, and then I run the little program and do it. Now let's just do this one. This one here is an inherited class. So I've got my original class, which actually goes in and gathers. Now it doesn't create a new instance of that class, it actually uses a get. So we're creating a method, and we give it all of these things, and then from this method we return this. So we take in all of these things here, and we convert them into a string with date and a project with commas in between, so that we can write a single line to a file, and then we return it into this method. So when we call this method, we return this string, and then we just do a show me. So the show me is really just a message box just showing you what to do, and I don't really need that return, so that's rubbish. We then did an inherited class, and the inherited class is called file TSE, and I think the original one was file timesheet event, so it's time, but it extends the time event thing now. And all it does is it just brings in a new record file. So we give it the record file and it does that. And it also has two other ones through here. It's got a show me one of its own. So that's a method that just shows you the information of the record file. And then it's got another one which is write to file. So it's writing this information to file. So what it's going to do is it's going to get this, it's going to go and call the method in the original class and bring it into here, and then it's going to append it to that file. Now I want to step back a place and just go back to the tutorial of where I was looking at. So there's this one called class 6 in the Samardac tutorial where he he's got both a nested class and an inherited class. So the original class is called window, and in here he gets the name of the window and he gets the ID of the window, and then he can activate the window and it pops it up so it becomes a window in the foreground or whatever is the active window on the theme, and he can actually just do a little message box, so it announces win properties. He then has an extended class or a inheritance class. The inheritance class just runs. It says if Notepad's not open, open it. So it just says run Notepad. Or else if it is open already, then activate it. So it's got if win not exists. So if the window doesn't exist, open it up. If it does, then it doesn't. So initially I broke this down and I said, well, actually you don't need the original new window. So I didn't create an instance of some window is equal to new window. I just made one called some not, which is some note is equal to a new notepad. Then the first thing we did, so let's just run this here. The first thing we do, notepad's not running, so if I just run this now, and if I go Control Alt A, it runs, opens up Notepad. It then uses the get command, and then it gets that information and shows it in the pop-up window here. So it says the name, sorry, unfortunately though, this is one of the things, it's actually not doing a delay fast enough. So for this one here, I'm actually just going to have to go sleep, and we'll just say 300. And let's just see what happens there. So if I just save and rerun that now, and then go Control Alt A, it's now going through. Now you see it's got the title of the notepad, so that's now open. You see it's happening so fast, it's jumped down into here and it's getting the instance of Visual Studio Code rather than this. So it's got the notepad, it's now come through and it's given us the ID of the window. Now I can close that down, and now I'm just going to click on here so it's in the background. So notepad is still live, so I can now use Control Alt S. Now Control Alt S says if you've got a window ID, if you've got the ID of the window, then activate it. So if I go Control Alt S, you see the window is activated. So that means it's got this ID. So if we walk back up to here, we've created a new instance of this inherited class. But at the same point in time, we have got we've got access to all of these when we create an instance of that class. So we haven't created an instance of the original class, we've only made an instance of this class, but we've got access to all of these things in here. So in here, after I run A, which actually gets the ID, we now have the ID such that we can activate it here once we do it. So this is where I started from. So I suddenly thought, well, okay then, if I create a new instance of a class, then I should have the access to all of those other things. So like in that example of 6 from that tutorial, my items, now one of the things I just want to highlight a distinction between that, when he does this get, he's using a function inside AutoHotKey that goes into, so it's a system variable, and it brings back a system variable to the title of the window, and it also brings back a system variable which is the ID of that window. that's in the stack, the PID of the thing. So they're sort of, he's not getting anything external like I call the title up here, the name of the thing. He's not getting that. So we're not calling off and going and getting that garland which we're getting in the window at the beginning here. It's just using this method, and it's getting ones which are automatic. So, but it infers that I can actually access all of this other information from an instance of the inherited class. So that's where I started from. So I thought, okay, and this is as far as I got. After the end of that, I just had some variables that I've got. I then created an instance of the inherited class. So I've got my original class that just gets the data. And then I've got an inherited class that just gets the record. And it's got two functions inside. It's got two methods inside here. And this one's just got a simple method just going show me. So I should be able to then say in this one here, OTF, OT file, which is the instance of it, the dot show me, and that should work. So if we don't do anything else at this point in time, so I'm just going to just go blast. I've got that running. Let's just get that running. Run. Right, so I can actually just do that, and so if I run that, I should be able to get, so this is in the original one. So if I go control, so we'll stop that, and we just run this script here, and it's given me nothing. So it's actually saying my show me in here says show me this information, but we haven't got it because one, we haven't pushed it in there yet. So maybe if we do show me and we do that, and then in here we go show me and run it, we still don't get anything. Sorry, did I save that and run it? We're still not getting anything there. So this one here doesn't seem to be able to go through and get this other information. So that's a bit confusing. Let's just run that there out. But what I can actually do is in here I've got, well actually why isn't that working? Because that should work. This one here's got get 3, and if I use the TXX through there, so if I just go last, this will give me all the information that I want. Sorry, it's doing two things there, but it's getting all of the information that I actually need through there. Oh, sorry, that one's actually going through and reading this one here, which is getting, no, that's just getting that information. So where's the other one getting that? So that's getting the info. It's sorry, it's actually inside the get 3. I've already got a message box in there, so that's why I don't need that message box there. So it's actually saying in here, I'm using this to get this command. It's then returning. So at the end, so that's one of the issues with that. If we do the show me through there, so if we just come back and I just do that command, and if I just run that one there out. So let's get this clear. So if I come into here and if I go show me and I return info, then if I run this one here, shift run, why isn't that? That should be returning that, but it's not. Save, run, saying it's active, it's just got nothing to actually trigger it. Well, that's not working, so never mind. that's not working there, but we can actually get we can get this get3, and we returned the string that we actually want. And when we run rf, we actually get the show me down here, which is the show me inside of the inherited class, and it's doing the message box of where the files come from. It's just got one on the end of that. So if I now run that, it comes up with this information inside the get, so it's getting that information, it's showing me that I've got that, and then it's actually saying this is what's getting written to the file, and it's only not the notepad's actually just this bit here. But the second time I do it, it doesn't do it, which is inside here I'm doing that message box. Oh no, I'm not. Oh, I'm doing the TXX is trying to get that information inside here, and it doesn't work as it's trying. So that's why it's running that notepad thing, because that's what I've actually called that message box through there. And so if we actually look at the time capture, nothing comes through. All we get is a whole load of commas through there. Just remember that, nothing at the end there. So that is not working. So coming back to here, I'm suddenly thinking, no, I can't get that to work. But if I come into here and I don't do that method inside, but I actually just use file append, so I get this information, I get the file name from there, and or whatever, I get the file name, and then I just run it from here. If I just go run, that's 1, that's 2, and if I go and look at my time capture now, you see I actually have a new line of data. So it works. It actually brings that information through. But I was very, very unhappy with this solution on a number of levels. The first level that I was unhappy with this about is that I can't actually run that operation inside of a method. So that was something that I thought was no good at all. The second thing as well was I was activating my inner class, or my base class. I wasn't activating it with a new, I was actually just doing a function. So I thought that was wrong as well. But at the end of the day, I suddenly thought my original working one, when I got this working to work, I had one class and I had a method called write to file, and it worked with no problem at all. So somehow when I ended up with the original class and I ended up with an inherited class, suddenly I can't get that to work. So there's something wrong there. But and so 2 days I spent trying to mess around with these things and trying to get them wrong, and I just got so frustrated. I did a whole lot of other search on AutoHotKeys to see what I could find about classes and this, that, and the other to get examples. Couldn't get any really, and I suddenly thought, okay, then I'll look for some general stuff on classes and how they do it in other programming languages and things. In the end, I found a little Reddit thing of somebody saying they wanted to learn classes in AutoHotKey, and somebody said, well, if you can't find anything on AutoHotKey, go and try Python and see if there's any there. So I thought that was a good suggestion. So what I ended up doing was I ended up going onto this Python tutorial class going through here. Now this is a particularly nice one I quite like, because also he's got the snippets of the code inside of each of them, so that each of those 6 classes and stuff that he does. So you can actually just click on the actual code and then click on the raw, and then just copy and paste it into your code block as well. So I ended up going through the exercise where he actually was using instances, and he ended up going and using inherit and nested and all of that sort of stuff. So he covered the same sort of stuff, and he used this thing of employee. He used an extension of employee, which I thought was quite an elegant one. Is you had a basic in employee, and then you actually had a developer employee. So a developer had a little bit more than a normal employee, and then you had a manager, which was an inheritance of employee, and that had some extra things. So the manager would have certain number of people underneath him who were employees, and the developer, not only did he have his first and last name and pay level, but he also had what programming language. So in the original one, it has first, last, and pay, and then in the developer, we're adding a programming language, because that's sort of a specialist area that they need to know. Now inside AutoHotKey, when you do an initialization or something like that, you'd have this. Inside Python, they actually use this self, so that's the way that they do the construction of a class. And this is a static or a class variable up there. The other thing that I thought was quite a nice insight into here is that it actually calls first and last and pay in. So it's got three variables that it calls in, but it constructs out of the first two, it constructs an email address that I think is seriously cool. So I suddenly thought, well, actually, as I create a new instance of what I'm doing, I can create a first and a last and a pay, and or whatever, the time, the duration, the thing, the project name and stuff like that, and I can concatenate it all together and make myself an information string which actually has all the stuff that I want in it, and it can actually just construct that on the thing. So I don't need to have a special method to actually make that for me. It's already, I can just build it up from the variables inside there. So that was something that was quite interesting to me. Again, this is another thing that I thought was quite interesting inside the Python one, is this developer is sort of like we would actually have developer extends employee. But this one says, well, okay, then to do the developer, you still need the stuff from the employee. So we need to give it first, last, pay, and program language. But inside the class developer, which is the inheritance class, I'm only going to give you the program language, because that's the only thing I need extra from the developer. All the rest relate to the employee class. So they have this thing called super init. So in some ways they're initializing a instance of the base class. So they're initializing an instance of their mob, of which they can then put the first, last, and pay information into that class, because there's nowhere to put it into this inherited class, because all we do is actually just have this program language that we actually give this. The other things that we give it, they go and put it into the base class. So it's done that. Oh, that's interesting. I quite like the concept of what we're doing there. So again, if I just run this one here, right at the end, I've just got this one where the developer.email. So if I just control, sorry, it's just shift and run that one there, you'll see down the bottom here, it'll come through, it's thinking about it, and there it is. It's actually come through and given that first developer, Corey Shift, email address through there. So, and that's what we're doing here, is we're just displaying that particular part of it. But that's what I quite like, the construct of doing that, which wasn't in any of the tutorials. So that was one part, and so they were able to get things from the base class and hand them through into the extended class. So that was one thing it did, but it allowed me to think about where I could get extra information on this. So I went back into AutoHotKey and I started thinking, well, what class do I know? So I went and looked into Jean Lalonde's example that he did in AutoHotKey. And when I was looking at his code, I said, oh, what does that mean? One of the things that struck me right at the beginning, when I was actually trying to look at AutoHotKey, if you just go and look at the notes and things like that, the documentation, you know, classes are under objects. So objects have these sort of thing that can have all sorts of wonderful things inside them. And inside, so right at the beginning, before making any classes or anything at all, he's actually got a couple of objects so that he can stuff things into them. So if a class ends up with an instance of that class, you can say, oh, well, go and shove that into there. And so you can get several instances into the thing. And they're outside the class itself, so they're not going to be destroyed or recreated or anything like that. So I thought that was an elegant way of just having these things up the top there that you can tuck things into if you needed to. Now, as it is, I'm not doing multiple iterations. So inside this one, I'm just going to run this one just so that we can remember what it was. This one here takes the CSV. So this has the song's name, the album that it's on, which track it's on the album, how many seconds it logged, and what year it was in. So it takes that information from a CSV file. So if we just run this one through here and we run that, it says copy the collection to the clipboard, and we go yes. And if we just go into Notepad or plus and open this up and go V, you'll see that it's now got the album, and then it lists under each album each of the songs that relate to that album. So I was suddenly thinking, well, let's have a look at his code there. Now I know he's got a nested one. So he's got this upper class album, and then he's got this nested code, or he's got this nested class called song. So the song has a new string title, string integer track, and integer duration and things like that, and he can get the string. He uses getString to return this long concatenation of the line, so it's basically a string that he's bringing back, which has got several things in between it. But if we go up to the outer album one of the things that struck me through there is there's this add song, and you're suddenly thinking, well, the song is a nested class. So how do I get that song? And he says, well, you give it OSong. So I thought, well, okay, then what's OSong? So we just go and find OSong, and we go up. And here's OSong, which is a new album song. So that means in here we have a new class of song. And so I can give this, which is this thing here, has it's an array, so it's given him 1, 2, 3 things through there. So it's actually given him the song name, the song where it's located on the album, and the duration of the song. So we've got that, and it's in this variable called OSong, which is this instance of this new album. So I was suddenly thinking, oh, this is interesting. So suddenly, in my in my nested class, I can give something up to the class above. And the way that I do that is that I give it a variable in here that it can work. Now, in all of the tutorials through Samardac things, there's none of that. And this is what confused me. Inside here, the ID is actually self-generated, well, it's generated within that method. It's not actually brought from outside. So this was the little idea that I've got. So I suddenly thought, well, the best thing I can do is actually attack this issue that I have from the point of I'll go, because that was a nested way that Jean did it, I'll work on the nested. So one of the couple of things that I ended up doing was inside the class, this is the nested class inside. So this is a nested class. So I can start off with a new. So as soon as I run the class, as soon as I run an event, it creates a new instance. So it's not using a get, so as in not creating anything. And when I do the get, it'll actually bring back something when I ask it. I'm creating a new, and in this new, it's actually we're giving it these items through here. Now at the same time we're giving them all those items, we're also building up this one here called this info, or this inf here is equal to all of that construct. So we're now getting the string that we want. So that's our inner nested class that we've got. I've also just got another method here, which is just show, which is just putting all those things together as well and doing a message box. So now what I can actually do is that I've got this item, this variable called this.inf, which is created with a new instance, and I can actually give it into these into the outer class, which is the file.fte or whatever it is. So what I can now do is I can create an instance of the original nested class. So I'm creating that's the outer class, that's the inner class, and I'm giving it all of these variables here, and I'm creating a new instance of that class. So that's the class overall. Now I'm getting that variable, or we're getting the .inf. So we're getting, like in the Python one, we're getting the email address through here. So we're getting that particular variable coming through, and we're assigning it to this variable here. Now, this is the first time I think we see it. We see this message box here, which we're just going to call this message box 222, just to see what information we get back. So we're just creating an instance of the original class and getting that data through to there. Now we're creating an instance of the outer class, not the nested class, and we're going to give it from the inner class, or the nested class, we're going to give it this variable here, and then we're going to give this variable to an instance of our outer class which actually has this write to file method, and we're going to give them this value through here, and then they can then do that file thing. So let's just run this one through here. So if I just go shift and run, it comes up. So the first one that we're coming up with, the 222, is here. So it's showing us that this one here has got our string as we want it. Hooray, hooray. The next time is coming up, inside the show me, it says what's our file, and I'm also giving it this variable so we can see whether we got the same nested element. And so that's going okay, and then nothing else happens. But if we now go into the items through here, you'll see this one here with a nested class. So it's now written in. So that is exactly what we wanted to do. So what criteria was actually happening here? So all of my classes start off with a new initialize, so they don't start off with a get or something like that. It's a new. So we create the new, and I can then take from one class or an instance of one class, and I can feed that information to a method in the second class or the outer class, and it can generate within the method the writing to file. So I've got the inner class, which grabs the data. I've got the outer class, which writes to file, which is what I wanted in the end. So that is how the class worked, and I thought that's what I wanted it to do. So hooray, hooray, hooray. I don't need a tantrum on that. So I then suddenly said, well, okay, then that works for a nested class. Can I use the same example then for inherited classes? And so I use exactly the same process all the way through. The only thing is our class starts off as a new, and we have all of the data through there, and this other one just extends the one. So it's an actual inheritance class through there, and I actually have exactly the same thing through there. And when I run it at this point in time, and so if I run it here, so I've created a new instance of the original class and given it the variables of what it needs. So that's where I've got it from the GUI. I've then created an item here, a variable which is this particular one of the information, and I've just done a show me, and then I've actually created a new instance of the inherited class, and inside here, I'm just going to take those out at this point in time. I'll come back to them because I think it's important to do something. And so inside here, I'm just doing a show me after I give it that information and the other one. So if I just go shift and run that there, we've got the information from that simple inherited class through there. And if I just go into the TimeCapture text, it's come through in the inherited class. So exactly what we wanted to do. So we can now, I'm confident that I can now use those things. And the little clue on that was this being able to hand that instance into. So I'm taking it out of the first class and I've given it to the second class or the inherited class, or I'm taking from the nested class to give it to the outer class, and it can then be used within that area. Now on that point of view, whereas in on the item through here when I was doing class 6, it had this idea of I made one instance of the inherited class, and yet I was able to access the other items inside the original class. So I was suddenly thinking, well, okay, then that's the structure that I'm using for that. For getting those, and this is the structure that I'm using for the ID. Once I've created that ID through the first one of actually using the get not. So I then suddenly said, well, okay, then let's just extend my ideas on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this variable blah. So from the outer one, now I don't think actually, sorry, because this outer this new instance out here. Now let me just go through and look at that. Class 6. See, class 6 only has the run command in there. So this is actually saying .run, and then it's saying .get, and it's saying .announce those. So it's actually saying once I created an instance of the inherited ones, I'm also creating instances of all of the original ones as well. I'm not passing them anything, but they're available for use. So I'm suddenly saying, well, okay, then I've created an instance of the outer file. So inside here, I should have this variable .inf. But in fact, I don't think I do. So when I try and do this message box, so on one side of the message box, I have this information, OTC1. But on the other side, I have blah, which is this. So this is suddenly saying I can go and access that. But I haven't actually generated it. So let's just run that. And you'll see it goes plus and then nothing. So it's not giving me anything through here. I've got to dig into that a little bit more as to why it works inside this one, but why it doesn't. I've got a feeling because none of them are taking anything in. They're self-generated within themselves. And this is if the win exists, so there. So that's how they can operate, because there's nothing coming in from outside. Whereas possibly, I don't know. I'll have to explore that a bit more of seeing how, because that's just running them directly and suddenly saying, yeah, get them, and I've got them, and they're there to use. And later on, you see this window ID is created when you run this sum.get. So possibly I've got to do a get command. One of the things I do notice on this, when I actually split it into the two events, this thing, all it does is create new. I don't actually need anything else. I don't need this method. And then the second one, I actually only need the method write to file. So in some ways I can split it up, but it's not an efficient way of doing it. I don't think it's an elegant solution. I think the original working two solution is a better solution than the second one. But it's there, and so I've been able to make them operate. So the kind of what I'm trying to get at here, for 2 days I was smashing my head against a brick wall based on the information that I had, and it was only when I did the Python one that I ended up being able to understand Jean Lalonde's one a bit better, to be able to follow it all the way through and appreciate what was actually happening, how the outer class was able to access information through the inner class through passing this variable or this instance through there. And I think it's just called it OSong, although it's not actually an instance, because this is the class. So it's we're just passing it something through, and it's an object that's just called OSong at this point in time. So it's a long drawn out process. The information wasn't there, so I ended up having to broaden my area of knowledge. And what I actually found was getting a practical set of exercises from the Python one, and although they were different and the whole syntax was different and something like that, some of the logic was there. And also the other thing which I'm really pleased about is that I found out about being able to do this construct this email from this other data. So you're suddenly thinking, well, how much data do I need in there? And I don't need to actually make a method. I've got this generated at this point in time, so it's easy just to use straight away. So having that diversion has helped me in where I'm going. But it was a very inefficient way to actually get where I am. But now, with all the stuff that I've done, and I've broken it so many times, I do feel confidence enough to go forward. So in the previous video, this one has all the information of this and all of the tutorials and things, and you can actually download them, because I think there's links through to files on stuff, and there's the boards and the things that you can actually get. With this one here that I'm just doing at the moment, I will most probably only give the simplified information that I've got of the 3 basic classes, because the other ones are there, although I think I'll also have to have the TimeCapture file as well. but oh, actually, no, you don't need that because they're just simplified. So that should be enough. The other thing that was quite interesting, I was struggling along for quite a bit, and what I actually found was I sort of tried something else, and then when I was trying to program into here, I ended up with this instance here. Is I suddenly thought I had it showing on my screen. I scrolled from the top down. I found the gap, and then I was running this script, and nothing was happening. And I thought, oh, it's broken. I had it working, and now it isn't broken. But what had actually happened? It was down the very bottom, so it was working perfectly. But I thought it wasn't, so I suddenly started to have to write it all from scratch again, which was really very painful. So I do hope that helps. It's really, I'm sort of struggling through and trying to learn with a minimum amount of information. I'm a little bit comfortable with functions. I'm not overly comfortable with functions. Oh, sorry, one other thing I do want to point out here. Now, this is something that I said. Now, again, you've got the power of returning something. So if in here, I return this inf. So I create this here. So when I create a new instance of this, I'm going to return this inf through here. What actually happens is something a little bit nasty, is that suddenly this object is not, so if I actually go, let's just put that there, oh, blast. So if I now actually just do this, and I'll just blast, enter. Oh, I'm having a day of it. This is something again which I most probably have done several times myself. I'll just take that out of there and put it to there. If I've got a return when I've generated a new, so in the new I've generated that, but I'm returning this particular variable through there, then OTC, if I just go control save and run this now, I'll blast, control save and run, it's actually returning that, and that becomes, we're just assigning that variable, but it's basically returning that as that string. So if I now try and go and do this, so I want this new instance, but I only want this variable. Now if I run that again, and I run it again, I'm going to do a save and I run it again, you see it's only showing the code through here. It's not showing me anything because it can't get it. I've done that return. So don't force a return. The return should only be used inside a method, not in the main class when you're actually creating a new one, because otherwise, so at this point in time, if I now run this, I'm actually getting that particular variable which is called inherited. So that is correct, it's inherited through there. So I'm sure I actually did that stupid thing and I was trying to return things right at the very top, which it seemed I would actually say is a complete no. So just be aware of that, because it's another mistake that I made. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that's been of use to you. If you found it useful, please give a thumbs up.